Little bit of a contrast to, especially after the South Africa. Wow, what a challenging environment you guys work in. Yeah, today, yeah, my name is Tatsu Kawasaki. I'm a CCFP, or Critical Care Flight Paramedic. I work for a company called GCH Aviation in Christchurch, which is South Island of New Zealand. Today, I'd like to introduce you some of the broad system of what we do here in New Zealand, along with Aaron Turner, who's presenting after me. And hopefully he will go through quite a bit of the details of what CCP is in New Zealand. We have quite standardized CCP model here in New Zealand. So I tried to actually put more focus on specific operation that we do as air ambulance sector here. I'd like to start with some of the excitement development happening in New Zealand. It's been a lot of changes, new changes. First of all, the new NHS equivalent, National Health Service equivalent, Health New Zealand, just been established only a few months ago. So that's a very infantry state. But obviously the effort to standardize the whole health sector. Prior to this, there was multiple district health board operating each health services around the country. And this is obviously effort to standardize and more efficient service for New Zealanders, I guess. Under that, there is an organization called NASO, National Ambulance Sector Office, where land in air ambulance falls under. Another exciting change we had recently is the paramedic registration. So paramedic occupation has only become professional registered occupation in 2020. Actual registration only started about a year and a half ago. So that's also, once again, very new development. Now, currently, paramedics are registered just as a paramedic, one tier. So regardless of your skill levels, paramedics are registered under this council. However, our authority to practice as a paramedic or CCP is still governed by each organization that we work for. So, for example, my main role, I work as a CCP, but also I do have a casual contract with the land ambulance service, which sometimes I just, to keep up my skill level, I work in the land ambulance, and I only work as a paramedic because I don't practice on the land ambulance every day. So New Zealand ambulance service in a paramedics known to be paramedic-lead service with high level of autonomy. This is largely my observation, particularly comparing to the country I originated from, which is Japan. Japan is a highly regulated country. The EMS over there also has very highly regulated service. Paramedics works under very strict in the detailed regulations. Compared to that, we have primarily, instead of regulating what we can do or we cannot do, for the paramedic practice, we have a law to respect and keep the right of patients, including things like respect and high standard of care, and they have right to refuse treatment, the autonomy, and things like that. And once again, this is my pure observation, but compared to strict control by regulations, it seems to work here, probably with the mentality of Kiwis, common sense prevails, and empowering the paramedics seems to encourage people to do the right thing, which is I quite like about as a feature of New Zealand practice. On top of that, really, we also do have a practical constraint. As a small country of 5 million, we do have very limited amount of tertiary hospitals, even with the CT scanner, things like that is very limited. In whole of South Island, we only have 2.5, say 2.5, because one hospital only, it's a limited time frame operating, say, cath labs, for example. Inevitably, the pre-hospital paramedics role is expanded, and we've given quite a high level of autonomy as a result. Another uniqueness of New Zealand is we have, once again, it's a small country, we've achieved coming up with national standardized guidelines. So all CCPs in New Zealand work under the same guideline as core guidelines. Once again, this is as for CCPs, we look at this basically as a guidelines instead of protocol. So we do have autonomy in interpreting these guidelines to meet the actual patient requirements or patient-centered care, which is also backed up by a consulting system. We can actually easily ring up to consult for any complex cases. So that's just a real broad view of a background of a CCP. And hopefully, once again, Aaron will go through some extended scope that we can actually practice as CCP. So let me just talk about what the service I work for do. So as a part of restructure, reform, air ambulance sector also had quite a bit of a major reform in the last couple of years. So under the National Ambulance Sector Office, there are 3 contracts given out, north of North Island, in central North Island, in whole of South Island is a 1 contract down south. So down south, there's a HEMS group, which consists of 2 commercial helicopter companies, Heliotago, who does 2 bases, Dunedin and Queenstown down south of South Island. In a company I work for, which is GCH Aviation, we have 3 bases based in Christchurch, where I work, in Nelson and Greymouth, which we cover in top half of the South Island. We do primarily primary jobs, which is a trauma or medical primary jobs, and 20% of our work is inter-hospital transfer, and 10% of it is search and rescue. Let me talk about the search and rescue aspect later on, because that's another, I guess it's a unique part of our service. Basically, we are all-round service, try to do everything due to the lack of, I guess, resource in a small country like New Zealand. So primary service we do is basically just we respond to MVA and any medical calls. We do lots of retrieval for STEMI, stroke and things like that, because once again we have limited number of tertiary hospitals. Now our particular service in Christchurch, a lot of inter-hospital transfer is done by doctors and nurses from ICU team based in Christchurch Hospital. So this is where regional differences still do exist, although we try to streamline and centralize and standardize our services. So, say example, down south in Dunedin, They do a lot of inter-hospital transfers, and lots are done by paramedics. And also sometimes when required, they can also have a ability to pick up doctors and nurses from the hospital. Central is largely paramedic-lead practice, I understand. In one place in Auckland, which is the northern part of New Zealand, which is our capital of the country, the biggest city, they have the physician-based HIMSS service. So they do sort of quite close distance call even in the vehicle, so like a doctor service car, and also a physician-based retrieval in primary jobs. And that's the only place in New Zealand have doctors on board. The rest of the country is largely led by paramedic to do the primary jobs. So that each area has its own challenges. As a result, we have slight variation of the service. But once again, we do have base standardized CPG that is quite unique to New Zealand, I understand. So back to our organization, HIMSS. So Heliotag Aviation, we are governed, whole South Island CCPs are governed by HIMSS clinical medical team. So we have 2 medical directors and 2 clinical managers that we are given authority to practice, to work in practice as CCP. So to meet our regional differences, HIMSS Clinical come up with extended scope for us. And the difference we'd like to make is, although we do have standardized practice with the road ambulance crew, CCPs, we like to add on certain, it's a sort of a bit of a nuance, further excel in patient-centered care. Say example, in terms of pre-hospital emergency anesthesia, we have a lot more autonomy, freedom, or expected to practice with a patient-centered approach by altering a dose or type of medication that we use. And also the ventilator strategy, things like that. We are expected to push a little bit more of patient-centered care when we can, and that's our goal. However, once again, this is an all new system for us. So, say example, I've only started under this new system since last April. So. Once again, this is in very infantry state, and a lot to look forward to in terms of further development. Now, let me also introduce our second role, why we have to meet a high level of clinical interventions and functions. Small New Zealand, we don't have dedicated Coast Guard helicopter or police helicopter. It was interesting to also listen to the previous UK system, search and rescue system. I guess the balance of our service is more medical and less rescue, as we only do about 10% of work is rescue. However, not having any of those specialist helicopter service, we do have to meet certain standard. Although New Zealand, as you probably know, we're surrounded by steep mountains, and Kiwis are very active people, so people always are getting into trouble in the water and things like that. So we do work with a specialist team. For example, Alpine Rescue, we have luxury of calling in specialist cliff rescue team. Coast Guard, we do work with them, but primarily we ourselves are trained what the certain level of rescue. In Christchurch, we don't come off the hook. We stay on the hook because we're not rescue swimmers. But, for example, certain services up on far north, they have a rescue swimmer system. So once again, each region's got a slightly different variations, but all services in New Zealand, helicopter services in New Zealand, are multifunctional search and rescue, as well as medical helicopters. So, for example, this is a recent Alpine rescue. If you can spot the patient in left-hand side photograph, you're doing well. Even close up, it's pretty challenging to spot a small person on the cliff face. So, it's, a case like this, it's a little bit beyond our capability. So we had a luxury of calling Alpine rescue team to come and join us. In this case, they did the retrieval and the medics waited down the base to treat the injured patient. So yeah, we get to do multiple different type of training. I'm certainly not complaining. And we get to do Alpine training, water rescue training, boat rescue training, and even normal land rescue can be quite tricky, especially if we are aiming at the high level of medical intervention on top. And this part of a function is still not quite streamlined or standardized nationwide or even service-wise. So this is something that we need to keep working on to specialize and to decide on how much interventions we're going to be able to achieve, especially increasing demand of high level of clinical interventions that we now perform. So that's roughly our overall view of our service. And I'd just like to shout out to this great initiative of collaborations, especially just using an example of recent experience from collaborating with other services. So I guess New Zealand, what we like, and I'd like to shout out to people from New Zealand listening to this great forum. Yes, I guess we do lack in our own research in New Zealand. We often rely and piggyback on our great brothers and sisters and cousins in Australia, in UK. We are very lucky. We have similar practices and similar culture, I guess, in the same language. So we often rely on these guys. We probably do need to better with our own research as such. But, for example, I'm leading this program for our service, which is ultrasound and simulation-based education. And the first thing I did was just yell out to my great mates in the UK, James and great Christian, and for ultrasound, shout out to these people and from Ambulance Victoria and Haru. How amazing these people are. They're so willing to share their knowledge and everything they've developed over years. No hesitation in sharing the information. Hopefully we can pay back the favor in one day. Really, really excited to be involved in this collaboration now and in future. And yeah, once again, thank you very much for inviting me on this exciting forum, and stay in touch. Thank you.
Hi, Tatsu. Thanks ever so much for that presentation. Can I ask, with the work that you do with other agencies, how much collaboration training do you partake in?
Yeah, good question. So as I mentioned, that part, the search and rescue part of operation is not quite standardized or well structured. So I understand each service do quite different things. With us, we do, for example, actually today is one of the water rescue training. So we are working with Surf Life Saving New Zealand, and we are practicing the water rescue training. We do work with Coast Guard using their boat for the boat rescue training, and Alpine Cliff Rescue comes quite reasonably regularly to work together and do hoist training using a simulator, as an example. But certainly we can do a lot more and a little bit more structured. It'll be our next goal.
I imagine the logistics of doing the simulated training is a bit of a nightmare. That's one of the biggest hurdles you've got to climb, isn't it?
Certainly, it's a lot involved with obviously limited time and the budget. In a lot of in all of our say example Alpine Cliff Rescue guys, they're all volunteers, so that is a huge ask for them to come and join a training with us.
Absolutely, but at the end of the day, you learn from each other, don't you? So it's as much as them wanting to volunteer to learn from yourselves as it is yourselves learning from them. So listen, Tatsu, thank you ever so much for that presentation. Absolutely insightful. So thank you again. So on to, as Tatsu mentioned, on to Aaron. Aaron Turner is currently employed as a critical care paramedic by the largest ambulance service. I'm going to say New Zealand, Aaron, because I can't pronounce